window or we're going to have a problem. So about 10 minutes later, I did have a problem. The APs, not the MPs, but the APs from Lackland Air Force Base gave me a ride back to...
What is an AP?
Air Force Police, Air Police. But anyway, they gave me a ride back to Fort Sam Houston, Brooke Army Medical Center. And about an hour after that, the company commander comes in to, I don't know what you think you're doing. You're not in Seattle, and you know, you got high marks, and we would have you to be a candidate for Officers Candidate School, which was in Georgia. Mm-hmm. I said, I am not putting up with any more of this. And he said, I tell you what, you just stay on this base because you're going to get killed running around doing what you're doing. I'm 18. About 4 days later, here come a black major. You know, we really have high hopes for you, but you're equal on the base. I said, I'm going to be equal everywhere. I'm not going to volunteer for any more segregation. So as it turns out, when I got back here, they still tried to encourage me to go to Officers Candidate School. As a matter of fact, I was on the honor guard at the Olympic Hotel when President John F. Kennedy came to Seattle in November of 62. I was down to, and that's what they were trying to, I said, I'm still not doing it. No, I'm not going to volunteer to be discriminated against. And wearing a military uniform? But you know, there's a history of that though. I can recall back in Louisiana where blacks would come back from, and stories I heard, would come back from the Army, World War I and II, get caught at a remote bus stop or something, get beat up by other Americans. You know, it's sad, but I mean, you look at the racial climate in this country right now, and there's just so much hatred, and people don't want to acknowledge the contributions that descendants of the United States slaves made to this country. They don't want to do it. That's why we have to keep our story out there. I don't care if you don't want to hear it. I don't care what anybody says about, well, that was a long time ago. I had them. Yes, you did. Your family had something to do with it. All of you guys who had slaves, you are prospering on our forefathers' free labor. We never got to 40 acres on the loan of a government mule. When we were successful, Black Wall Street, you burned it down. The Army killed 300 people in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Everywhere you look, even all the way down to the Great Society programs, as soon as they start working, you defund them. And then wonder, well, what's wrong with the black community? And when they put federal money and public money into black neighborhoods, it's always to rent a white person's place, and other communities of color own their stuff. But then other communities of color have access to offshore money, which we don't have. Yeah. You can't say that we're the same as a Somali or Ethiopian or Nigerian. They buy planes from Boeing. We're the only group that's been in this country for 425 years. The Federal Reserve is 113 years old. We have never had, descendants of the United States slaves have never had a full-fledged depository member of the Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. So right now, with these small banks, they can get $15 to $20 million. Norway, for example, might want to put $100 billion in our bank. Mm-hmm. But right now, the way it's set up, we have to ask, Massa, may I? And that stuff is dead. As long as you're not involved in equally, I know a lot of my socialist friends don't like this, but I'm tired of being a second-class citizen. See, y'all can change parties and be accepted in Broadmoor tomorrow. We can't do that. We're going to be black forever, okay? So I want to make that clear. But the thing is that we have got to push for economic equity and economic justice. We pay taxes. You don't see any black people working a lot of these city contracts. And right now, the Washington State Civil Rights Coalition, Hayward Evans and Charlie James are sending out requests for information. We got it from Renton. One black firefighter, 150. We're asking folks in Kent. Bellevue's 42% minority. A lot of them are affluent. But Kent, SeaTac, Tukwila, we've got to start writing ourselves in. With the state of Washington, you know, I don't know what they're doing down there. They're talking about all these cuts and these shortfalls. Well, Senator Bob Hasagawa has a bill to create a state bank. 2 years ago, we gave Bank of America $39 billion of taxpayers' money, and here we are trying to make ends meet. This year, we're going to give them $47 billion for the. And what could we do with $47 billion with our own bank? We could be paying the teachers what they deserve. We could be taking care of the homeless. We could be training people. We could be creating additional jobs. We could be doing a whole bunch of things if we handle our own money. But for whatever reason, one lobbyist, I understand, for Bank of America gets $1 million a year to make sure the $47 billion keeps going to Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we sit back here cutting education, don't pay the teachers, don't pay the educators, and cutting programs for seniors, and giving somebody else our money. That's so idiotic, it doesn't make sense. As a matter of fact, I would encourage everyone listening, Ask your representative or your state senator, do you support giving our money to Bank of America, or do you support managing our money and not having these cuts and making sure the teachers are paid? Okay, I think that's something we need to ask folks.
The voice you are listening to right now is that of Mr. Eddie Rye, Jr. I do want to get to Seattle, and I want to get to the early part of the civil rights movement that took place in Seattle. I guess they call it the modern era of the civil rights movement. Dr. King and that relationship with folks who were activists, who were pioneers, who were trying to build community in Seattle, and how that connection worked with Dr. King to Seattle.
Reverend McKinney, Reverend Dr. Samuel Berry McKinney was a classmate of Dr. Martin Luther King's at Morehouse. And after the freshman year, I think Dr. King was 15 as a freshman in Morehouse. And after the first year, Reverend McKinney was drafted into the military. So he missed Dr. King later on, but he was responsible for Dr. King's only visit to Seattle in November of 1961. And he was supposed to speak at a large church downtown, and he spoke at Garfield. That's why it's so significant about the Garfield, the MLK Day at Garfield is significant because this is the only school he spoke at, the only public high school he spoke at. He spoke at 2 assemblies, and he spoke at the University of Washington. He was going to speak at this large white church, but at the last minute, they came up with some reason why he couldn't speak. And Reverend McKinney is still chagrined about it today, because someone guy, we'll give you your money back. Reverend McKinney said, we're not even worried about that. So he rented the Eagles Auditorium. And so Dr. King spoke down there. In terms of the early civil rights days, I can think about Reverend McKinney. I can think about Bishop John Hurst Adams, whose name was on the building that used to house the Central Area Motivation Program. Someone took his name off of that building. He's no longer, I don't know why the mayor and the guys let it happen. We had the Nelson Mandela room, the Soldier and the Truth room. The lady took, the director took all the pictures of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and threw them in the garbage can and said, I'm from Belize, I'm not an African American. Well, you rode our coattails to get what you got, but we had 2,500 people sign a petition to keep camp. And the city council and the mayor and everybody else ignored it. And, all that really was saying is that we really don't want a bunch of black people in the central area. Not even if, if they're poor, we don't want them here. And that was to provide services to people. But, it's fine to give money for refugees, and they should. It's fine to give money for immigrants, and they should. But LGBTQ community, they should. But when it comes out of the descendants of United States slaves, don't give money to white women and say you give it to us, because you're not. And I know 4 major white women trucking companies today. They get 85% of the federal money, and you've never seen one woman drive one of those trucks.
Let me play that back again. Repeat what you just said for clarity purposes, so that the folks who are listening, that doesn't go by them.
I said 4 white female trucking company owners get 85% of the money from the Department of Transportation, go through Sound Transit, through the City of Seattle, and all the other federal DOT money, where they have a so-called DBE program. These white women are receiving 85%, and not one woman is driving a truck. And the reason why they create these programs is to make sure there was opportunities in employment and areas where we had been left out. So when they put everybody else in, you can rest assured that the descendant of the United States slave will not be selected. It hasn't happened. That's why we request the numbers, because the numbers don't lie. Now here's the thing. 3 years ago, there was a waiver submitted, I think by Leslie Jones of Sound Transit, to waive these white women out of the program. Okay? And they got the waiver to waive them out of the program, and now DOT has said it's going to take us 6 months to implement it. Well, if a brother or sister was found not to be in compliance, they'd be gone the same day. So we have some serious problems with this maltreatment, preferential treatment for some, and they know that even though the woman's name is on there, and I'm not going to say they don't know how to run the company, but it was to create jobs for women, and it's not happening. And so anytime you put all the other minorities and white women in with descendants of United States slaves, you can rest assured the white man is not going to select a descendant of United States slaves. The numbers indicate that. Since I-200 passed, some people got upset because several years ago we made up a KKK sign. KVI, KARLSON, John Carlson, who co-chaired the I-200 initiative that destroyed us, and KOMO, ABC owns them. Okay? So some people, well, that's not fair to KOMO. Well, KOMO owns KVI. And they got the guy working on it, John Carlson, that's cost us thousands of admissions to universities and colleges. It's cost us hundreds of millions of dollars in opportunities. Before I-200 was passed, minorities and women were getting 26% of the state budget. Now we're getting 2%. And white women are getting most of that. So if blacks are receiving 1/100th of 1% of participation, what kind of community are you going to have? What kind of jobs are you going to create? What kind of future is your family going to have? Where your kids going to go to school, especially when you got that racism at the University of Washington.
My guest again is Mr. Eddie Rye, Jr. You know, we should just sit down and do an entire documentary series with you. That's the only way we're going to have enough time to make sure that we get all of this information that you have. Again, a lot of it not necessarily in history books and probably none of it in our school system. This is KVRU.org and soon to be KVRU 105.7 FM. I want to talk with you as we move forward here about a thoroughfare that we have called Martin Luther King Jr. Way. Used to be Empire Way. For folks who don't know how this happened, please share the story with us about how this all came to be.
Actually, I was on the radio at KYAC hosting the Sunday evening program, and the late Freddie Mae Gaucher, who was one of the top leaders in the city for a long time, brought in Reverend Jesse Jackson for me to interview. And we were talking about Stevie Wonder having this event January 15th, 81, to implore Congress to make Dr. King's birthday a national holiday. And Reverend Jackson said, well, you guys are so far away, maybe you can do something locally. So I started talking to some folks, Clarence Williams, the black firefighters, and other people at the time. And we said, well, why don't we try to get the name of Empire, because it started at Madison, which was the black community at the time, went through the black community at the time for 8 miles. And so we collected some signatures and stuff, and by April of 81, we had a hearing with the City of Seattle's Transportation Committee. And at that time, the late City Councilman George Benton was the chair, and Bob Morgan was the staffer. And, it went round, back and forth. Well, why don't you name a library? Why don't you name a school? The Times, the PI, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, all were opposed to it. As a matter of fact, the person that was, it went before the Board of Public Works, and I have a copy right now, where the Board of Public Works said, okay, we'll change the name from Madison to Denny, or we'll change it from Denny to Yester, or we'll change it from Denny to, or from Yester to where Martin Luther King and Rainier intersects, because they were avoiding some people who were opposed on the south side of Martin Luther King. And these people eventually filed a lawsuit. So anyway, to cut it short, in July of 82, the city council voted to change the name, and in August, Mayor Charles Royer signed the legislation to make it official. So rather than put the signs up, these folks filed a lawsuit, which led to a bunch of protests, and we eventually had the Department of Justice and everybody out there. And I think the medium, Chris Bennett, did a good job of photographing everything. At first, the first demonstration, there was 3 of us: Omari, Garrett, Kwame, now Y. King, myself, and we were surrounded with reporters, and they were just tearing me up. Oh, ain't nobody here. Da, 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 da. So anyway, about 2 weeks later.
But you were there.
Somebody
was there.
2 weeks later, it was almost 200 people, and that was largely due to Chris and Benton and Fitzgerald Beaver from the Facts, owner of Facts. He had something in the paper every week too, and Chris actually would take pictures of the demonstrations, because on one of the demonstrations, Omari got injured. A man had put out a sign on the sidewalk or something. He was walking or running and ran into it. Anyway, that was in the paper. The picture of me, Omari, and Y. King, that was in the paper. I got to let Y. King know he's one of the founders of the street, because he was the youngest person there. We had really some, young people out protesting, demonstrating. Larry Gossett brought his kids out. They were young at the time, to let them see what it was like. We had another situation where you had that Empire Way Tavern, and a lady came out of there. She was about 5 feet tall, and she was already drunk. And she came up to Bob Barnes, the kind of large white guy. He was one of the co-founders of MLK. He was with the Ship Scalers Union at the time. And she came up to him and slapped his glass off and said, "You nigger lover," and tried to step on his glasses. And I'm not gonna say hit in the head with the picket sign. He can't remember it. But anyway, and then a week later, the Department of Justice was there, and an officer by the name of Nantui, a brother, went into the Empire Way Tavern. What do I do? Boy, you just had a picket sign you had a minute ago. So as it turns out, next thing we know, this white dude come flying out head first, Nantui on him, and handcuffed him. And another white officer said, "Aren't you being a little rough?" The brother officer, Nantui, told him, "Do your job, I'm doing mine." But that brought the Justice Department out. So anyway, what happened is that in November, because they wouldn't put the signs up, November 15th, 1983, we had the very first Martin Luther King March to protest the city of Seattle not putting the signs up, the Martin Luther King Way signs up, and also to implore Congress to make Dr. King's birthday a national holiday. And on my Facebook page is that's why we got it's at the 35th, and it's not the 35th anniversary, it's the 35th March, because in '83 we had two marches. The second march was the 20th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington, which was August 27th, '83. And that's when my daughter Angela was holding the little sign. She was 3 years, 10 months old. That was her fifth demonstration. Okay, that's where she gets it from. So, as it turns out,
your daughter, by the way, for those who, yes, that very same Angela Rye is Mr. Eddie Rye Jr.'s daughter that you hear and we see so often now, representing a variety of different issues and causes on national television. Congratulations to you and your daughter.
Well, thank you. But I'm going to finish the story, because what happened is that in November 2nd, 1983, Congress of President Ronald Reagan signed the King Holiday Bill, which would be the third Monday in 1986. So after he did that, Ron Sims, County Councilmember Ron Sims, and County Councilmember, I think it was Bruce Olson, had a proclamation naming the county Martin Luther King County. Okay, that was in '84. But in '83, after 4 weeks after Ronald Reagan signed the King Holiday Bill, the Washington State Supreme Court ruled the city of Seattle had the authority to change the name of the street to Martin Luther King Way. Now, the reason why they didn't want us to have Martin Luther King Way, and Bob Morgan, I hope they don't fire, he still works for the city, he said, "Eddie, don't let them make you change for Martin Luther King." He said, "That's Highway 900. They'll have to put a sign up on the freeway." And man, that's why they were just going nuts. "Oh, why don't you have a library?" John Miller, former congressman, former CLC, he had me on, and they had this black guy who had Holly Park secondhand store. And anytime, "Oh no, we're against that. We don't need that. It's going to cost too much money and stuff." So we were together for about 10 minutes before we went on a live program, and I changed his mind. John Miller, the host of the program, turned red. I went nuts. "Well, you said that you were opposed to naming that for Martin Luther King." He said, "Yeah, but I think it's the right thing to do. I agree with Mr. Rye." And the people in his neighborhood went nuts on him the next day. But it was a live radio program. He couldn't change it. So that's how we got there. I do want to say that in 1999, though, this county had been symbolically named for Martin Luther King for 15 years, and nobody knew it. So at the Martin Luther King event in 1999, I put on a motion on the floor. I said, "It's been 15 years. Nobody knows it's Martin Luther King County, and we should charge Councilmember Larry Gossett with promulgating legislation to change the name of the county." And so as we turned out, it had only the state legislature could change the name of the county. Senator Adam Clanton, the 37th District, introduced legislation 8 times. And finally, in 2005, it passed, and Governor Gregoire came up to King County Courthouse and signed the legislation. Then it took us 2 more years to get the logo, because it was a black man's face was going to be the official logo. And then, so right now, if you look at all the buses, the county vehicles, including the sheriff, I said on the sheriff vehicle, I want to have a tear coming out of that. But anyway, so a lot of folks just don't know. This is the only municipality in the country named for Martin Luther King. And the late Julian Mott used to say, "How did a handful of you?" I said, "No, we had big support." Matter of fact, Larry Goss and I met with Martin Luther King III in 2002. He was speaking up at, it was right before, I think it was 2002. Was it that? Oh, let's see. No, it was about 3 or 4. And Larry showed him the map. He said, "I had no idea it was this big. 2,500 square miles. At that time, it was just about 2 million people. And Martin Luther King III had no idea it was that big." And we still, and I talked to some members of the Black Caucus, "Man, you guys out here Congressman, many times you got all these majority black counties down here in Mississippi, and not one of them named for Martin Luther King Jr.? Well, Rye, you embarrassed me. I'm not embarrassed. I was just asking a question, brother. So I'm putting it on all the members. You know, if you don't have, you guys have to start naming something. Malcolm X, Soldier of the Truth. Somebody, you know, we got to. If we don't push ourselves, who else will?
My guest again is Mr. Eddie Rye Jr. If I'm not mistaken here, which I know I'm not, King County was King County, but the king that the county was named after was a slave owner. Is that correct?
William Rufus B. Devaney King was a slave owner, was going to be vice president when Franklin Pierce died before he could take office.
Yeah. And it is now officially Martin Luther King County.
That's right.
KVRU.org, KVRU, soon to be 105.7 FM. My guest is Eddie Rye Jr. I want to talk now about the march, the rally, MLK Seattle celebration. You've segued into that, talking about this being the 35th one. And I want to talk about some of the things that are going to take place at the rally. I know that there's the rally, there's workshops.
Workshops first. There are 26 workshops. All the information is available at www.mlkseattle.org. You can find out all the information by going to that website. One thing we added last year, and I insisted really that if we don't have, I hope we have it, but I told her there's no way that Martin Luther King Jr. would want his name celebrated without acknowledging the most prolonged civil rights struggle going on now in North Dakota with our Native American brothers and sisters. Okay, there's no way. Matter of fact, one of the co-founders, Bob Barnes, I mentioned earlier, got his last. He went back and actually went to jail on behalf of the Indians. As far as I'm concerned, he should be a speaker downtown at the rally. Okay, but he's one of the founders of the organization as well. There are also, well, in addition to the workshops, the rally, and then the march, and I sent something out. I took the prerogative to invite the Seattle Seahawks to lead the march. Now, I talked to Mike Flood, and he was saying, well, I can't go and say, I said, no, don't talk about losing. Let's say we want a celebratory mood on Monday, because they'll be going to play somebody for the NFC Championship. Okay, so I left it like that. The other thing that we added last year, after all that, is because it's one thing to celebrate Dr. King and to have the camaraderie and exchange ideas and information and go on the walk. Last year we added an Information and Opportunity Day, and we brought employers in, we brought other folks in. This year, because of the fact it's such an emphasis, like we have Amazon and UPS and one other company who are hiring on the spot, but you must submit your resume online. So we have a resume bank. Rodolfo Hurtado from EEOC, folks from WorkSource will have a resume bank. People can come in with their iPhone, get your resume built, get it updated. Then you can go around to all those employers there and just shoot your resume right to them. Now, for Amazon and for UPS, you have to file online. I think there'll be representatives from various city departments, county departments, state departments. There'll be at least 10 apprenticeship programs. SVI will be there with their pre-apprenticeship program. So we want to do, and even some of my committee members look, it looks like it's a separate thing. But to give somebody, build them up like this, and hear some fantastic speeches, and Tuesday morning you wake up with no hope. I want people to leave there with hope, if you want it. Everybody don't want it. Everybody don't need it. But if there's a chance to receive some training, there's a chance to go to college, if there's a chance to get into apprenticeship programs, pay $27 an hour. I mean, you can live in Seattle. so I'm saying that, in addition to memorializing Dr. King.
You mean buy a home in Seattle or rent in Seattle?
Well, I think you have to start at the low level first, brother. when you journey out now, that's $47 an hour. See, like them truck drivers I'm telling you about,
yeah.
They make $45 an hour. That's why all white men are driving them trucks from the white women-owned companies. 45. I mean, what burns me up, I wouldn't have a problem if women were driving the trucks. But what also is the disproportionate share they're getting, 85% of all the money, and then the people are going to point to, what's wrong with the black community? What's wrong with the black community is you got us in a second-class citizenship economically, and until we get out of that, it's going to just be prevalent.
Who are some of the speakers who were involved or those who are involved in the workshops this year?
I would have to have everybody go because there's 26 workshops.
Okay.
I know that Minister Shirley Poston is doing something with the veterans. I think El Centro de la Raza is doing something on the history of El Centro de la Raza. But if you go on www.mlkcl.org, everything is there, who the conveners are, who's on the panels, and all those kind of things.
Okay.
And the march will go from Garfield